So just to be clear, as a little disclaimer, as an independent contractor for the Murder Mystery Company, which is under the umbrella of American Immersion Theater, I do not speak for the company. I am simply speaking of my experiences working as an actress for the company.
Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Campaign Corner, your venue for all things tabletop. A chance to hear about the RPGs that you've played, with a different guest every episode. Today's adventure is Vivian Nichols, a producer and actress from the Worcester-based improv comedy group Wednesday Night Mayhem. She's here to guide us through a different kind of role-playing system, one that doesn't use dice. Let's roll initiative. Vivian, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you paint us a picture of your last murder mystery show?
Yes. My last murder mystery show was a public show, which is always nice because everyone there has specifically bought tickets and they get dinner, 3 courses of dinner. So it's pretty fun. From my perspective, I get there super early, help set up. I'm usually the one giving table speeches at the beginning, which is an explanation of the rules. And it takes a while because at the public shows that we do in Agawam, there are typically about 20 to 22 tables of 10 people. So
that's a big party.
That's a lot of people. And of course, when you give the rules, you want them to all be seated so everyone can hear them, but there's also a bar. So there's a lot of getting up and getting down, and it becomes very strategic. So that's sort of the first part of the show is we're setting the scene and that sort of thing. And then typically how the show is structured is there's an act 1. So once everyone knows the rules and if they're playing a character, what character they're playing, we continue setting the scene, remind them of the rules, and it always depends on which theme it is, and each script is a little bit different. But typically, by the end of Act 1, someone is dead. And
gasp.
Yes, exactly, gasp. And the audience will get to see that, and that leads into the first lineup. So all of the suspects line up, we get to meet everybody, and then they and their tables get more information. So they kind of flip to the next page of clues, they get to go over that, which leads into investigation time, where they're all sharing clues with each other. And then there's Act 2, another investigation time, Act 3. And that finally it becomes final sentencing time, where everyone comes up with their answers as a team and submits them, and we give out awards. So I don't want to share necessarily which theme this was because I don't want to give away any secrets. But I will say that on occasion, there may be a second death in the show. And at this last one, I was lucky enough to play a character that died. So I got to die, and I love it because as an actress, that means I get to have a big dramatic death scene, leave, go upstairs and change into my normal human clothes, and it makes my life a heck of a lot easier. So I really enjoyed the last show because I was able to take off my makeup and not really have to work for the last little bit. So it was a good show.
Something that D&D and Murder Mystery share in common is their structured performances. How would you describe Murder Mystery rules to someone for the first time?
I referred to the table speech, and that is precisely that. It is explaining the rules to people who've just arrived at the Murder Mystery show so that they know how to play. So perhaps I should just give you a table speech.
I'm your audience.
All right.
Take it away.
Okay. Well, actually, I'll explain it a little bit. So because it varies. The first thing I would do is approach a table, and we do this thing called crosstalk. So let's say it's a table of 10. I'm looking across the table at the person far away from me, but speaking to the person near me, and I would say something like, I'm looking for someone in a bright green shirt. And something like that will lead into kind of getting the whole table's attention, because then that person will look and go, oh, well, that's Frank right over there. And Frank will say, oh, who are you? And I would introduce myself in character, and by then the whole table's looking at me. So we do that instead of a, hey, everyone, pay attention. So that's called crosstalk. And then I would, if I were casting a character at that table, I'm really on the lookout from the start of who I'm going to cast. And a big thing is following instructions. So once I've introduced myself in character, I would say, now you all know me, but what are some of your names? And when I introduce someone, so I would say, what is your name?
Abton.
Abton. Well, you look like a man of means. Why don't we give Abton a nice cha-ching, Abton? And I do a little hand motion with that. And whoever does the hand motion and says cha-ching, Abton, is probably a good listener who's going to follow instructions and would probably make a good character. So I do a couple of those, and then I realize who I'm going to pick, and I say, oh, but I do recognize this person. And that's when I would cast them. And again, this is if there's a character at that table. There are variations, but let's go with that. So then they get their hat or their little costume piece, a name tag, and some money to share with their whole table. And that's when I launch into the actual speech, which goes a little something like this. Now listen very carefully, because the next 20 seconds could very well save your life. You are all working together as a table team to solve a murder. No one is dead yet, but from the looks of this crowd, someone will be soon. The true killer could be absolutely anybody, as long as they're wearing a name tag. We'll give you the chance to ask them all questions during our investigation times. During these times, you'll be asked to leave your table and speak with all the different suspects, as they'll all have different clues you'll need to solve the mystery. I recommend using some of this money to bribe the suspects or anyone else in the room who might have information. And if you aren't sure what to ask, there are suggested questions right on the money. At the end of the evening, whichever team correctly identifies the motive and opportunity of the true killer will be crowned our detectives of the night. Your team is very lucky because you have an actual suspect right at your table, which means you get this special binder of clues. Playing a suspect is fun and easy. There are just a few simple rules. Everyone will read the front of the binder as well as the first page. Now, when you hit this top secret stop page, do not turn it until we tell you to. You're all one team, so you're all in this together, which means that his clues are your clues, and it's up to everyone to help him play this suspect. All these other people, well, they could ask you questions too. If you know the answer, it's in your binder. And if you don't know the answer, just use the secret code words, I don't know. If someone offers you a bribe, take the money, but give them a clue in exchange. And most importantly, you cannot lie. Everyone is being honest tonight. So I'll need a promise, a pinky promise from everyone that you'll tell only the truth. Excellent. Well, I'll let you get started on your suspect goals. And how about a round of applause for our suspect?
So that's our table speech.
That's the table speech. So that's what you'll get verbally before any sort of act even starts. And there's also a little laminated list of rules at each table.
So our listeners got a sense of how to play, but how would you define the roles they occupy in what you do?
A show could have a varying number of actors in it. It's possible to do a show with one actor, but all of the ones that I've done have at least two. So there's the lead, and this is in a classic murder mystery and in a lot of our scripts, not all of them, don't want to give too much away, but the lead is the person who dies and then comes back as the detective. That's a very classic murder mystery sort of structure, so I don't think I'm giving away too many secrets with that. And in most of our scripts, there's also a host, and it's more often than not, it's a female, so I've played the host a lot, and so the host is the one who comes out the top of the show and and kind of recaps the rules, recaps where we are, what the setting is, and that sort of thing, and kind of introduces the person who's the lead. And between the two of them throughout the show, they're pretty much the ones questioning people and doing the lineups and that kind of thing. Then we have the side characters who are for crowd control in a lot of cases, but it's also nice to have people during investigation time that are really solid on the clues, that can sort of point people in the right direction, give their characters information, but also tell them who to talk to next and that sort of thing. And the rest of the roles are played by audience members. So the audience in a private show, the audience is the client. So somebody bought the show and they decide who comes. I mean, it all depends on what kind of show it is. If it's a birthday party, they're probably the one throwing the party. They invited people. So all of those people kind of fall under the category of the client. But there's obviously one person who booked the show. And the person on our end who communicates with them would be the show captain. So that's an actor designated to call the client before the show, make sure we're on the same page about all of the details. And then once we arrive, they may have to ask certain questions. Where do you want us to change? Which table are we using as our little props table? And that kind of thing. So there's one person designated to do that, and that would be the show captain.
So interestingly, I haven't brought this up yet, but murder mystery is a legitimate form of encounter or mission in D&D, in many games that I've played before. And you mentioned that it's all about the amount of attention that your players pay to what's going on. And I can tell you that there's a few skills in D&D. Insight, investigation, perception, that I'm really starting to notice are the analog to what you're describing. Insight, for example, is reading someone's intentions, and in older versions, it was literally called sense motive. What I'm curious about is what you would imagine a murder mystery would look like in a D&D setting, because I can tell you it's something that is a very popular and very classic type of encounter to go to. What do you think that would look like?
That's interesting. I don't know if I know enough about D&D to put that there. I know what we do always comes down to the facts, and I think it's a lot of people's biggest downfall to kind of look at a character and be like, who's acting the shadiest? Like, who's making a face that looks like they're the killer? I think people get lost there because that's where they start to go, I think it's this person, and then try to make the facts work for them instead of looking at the facts first. So I don't know how, if some of it is like reading people, I think that could get a little tricky, a little complicated. And I should mention too, I've actually attended a murder mystery put on by the same company. It was a custom show, so not a script that I was familiar with. And I realized it's actually really difficult to solve, to know what questions to ask. Even being so familiar with it, having done like 70 shows up till that point, it was just crazy how different it was being on the other side. So I don't know, maybe you could tell me what would be different about it in a D&D setting.
I would love to, because I have also seen it on both sides, as both a DM designing kind of a murder case to be solved, and as a player trying to figure one out. So not unlike what you said with your binders, we will roll out clues. That's something I've done. So I've had players recently in a campaign kind of scour a city to collect information on a certain fugitive, or let's say murderer for this case, murder professional that they're looking for. And what they have to parse through is the characters they're running into are saying a lot of stuff, but there might be one specific line that I'll identify as the clue.
Right.
And once they nail that, I might either write it down, either on a note card for them and pass it to them secretly, or write it on the whiteboard that I have back here. And once each player, if they split up, not unlike the tables that you deal with, once they collect all of the clues, they kind of pool them together, and they're sort of able to engineer where the other murder professionals, or the DM in this case, is trying to point them to.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of a connect the dots game.
Yes. Okay.
I think it might be something that you really enjoy if you ever get the chance, by the way.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Stay tuned, that might actually come up later. So I realize it's probably not lost on you that there's more than a few similarities between our two trades. Just for context, what is your familiarity with D&D?
With D&D, I've technically probably only played D&D one time. So for me, I know that I have to have some kind of character, and I believe there are different, I don't know what you call them, races? Classes. And what I like to do in the one time I've done it is try to find the piece of the world that the dungeon master failed to create. So I'll just throw something completely random, and they're like, well, now my character wants to go get ice cream, so where's the closest ice cream place, and what do I have to do with the dice to get there?
That's very chaotic neutral of you.
Yes. That's true.
What do you know about the alignment chart?
Nothing. I have no idea what that is.
That's fine. I can tell you that from my experience before I played, I saw it in like a lot of different memes and stuff like that. Have you seen where it says like lawful good, neutral evil?
Yes, and
That's
I really like that. Okay, I didn't know what it was called.
Yeah, that's your various character alignments. It doesn't play as much of a role in more modern D&D, but for a huge section of its history, that really was like the backbone of play.
I think it's a good tool for character building in general.
Oh, absolutely. It's basically a prompt for someone who might be completely new to it, where they're just starting from scratch. You'll say like, oh, you want to be a paladin? You're lawful good. You're going to respect authority, and you're going to try to help people. And all of their actions and decisions are going to be through that filter. In a certain way, I guess you could say in a murder mystery that everyone is a different shade of neutral, unless the killer themselves is someone that you think is evil.
Well, here's what's interesting about murder mystery is solving the mystery comes down to two things: who has motive and opportunity. So that's kind of what gets put on these characters more than anything else is, do they have the motive to kill this person? Do they have the opportunity to kill this person? So it's usually something along the lines of access to the murder weapon and a grudge against the person. So those are the key pieces of information you're given. But you also do have these other traits. And oftentimes it's an archetype. So there's a little girl in a lot of the shows. There's an old lady in a lot of the shows. They just have certain archetype characters. But what's cool is really technically what you have is just the information, and you can take a character and do a really unexpected voice with it or put a really unexpected twist on it, and that's kind of the fun part of being an actor or being an audience member playing a character. You can sort of take it and go your own way with it as long as you're giving the correct information.
So we've established that show captains are kind of like DMs, and the clients are like your party. If you were to start regularly playing D&D, what skills do you think would carry over?
Well, a big one, I think, a big skill that I've developed through Murder Mystery is improvisation and really knowing your character well enough to be able to react to anything. Because if you think about it, during investigation times when people are asking you questions, they literally could ask you anything. And it's your job to respond in character, but also to kind of bring it back on track, because sometimes you get questions like, well, what college did you go to? And it just is completely irrelevant.
We call that the backstory.
Right. And you can answer that, you can make something up if it's irrelevant, but you've got to sort of try to steer it back to whatever your clue actually is so that they can stay on track and you don't wind up going down this rabbit hole of information that is completely irrelevant. So being prepared for anything and knowing your character well enough is really important. And, sometimes you get put on a show the day before and you've never played that character before, so you've got to really be prepared and know all of that information. And also you need to be able to explain who you are really succinctly, because when you're in a room with 200 people and they kind of heard the intros, but they're still going to come up to you and be like, okay, so who are you? And you've got to be able to tell them in character, but really to the point, who you are, who you know, what your deal is. So those skills, I imagine, would definitely transfer over.
So with the recent onset of shows like Critical Role, Heroes of the Veil, and Harmon Quest, which you said you watched.
Love Harmon Quest, yeah.
Modern D&D is becoming much more theatrical and audience-driven. As a lifelong performer, what do you think the D&D community could learn from other types of immersive theater?
Well, I'm coming at it from the perspective of a performer, and I think that people who start with D&D and are trying to turn it into a show are obviously coming at it from a gaming perspective and their experience playing the game. I think if you are transferring that experience to a show or to immersive theater, it's very important to look at what you would want the audience's experience to be and what they would want their experience to be, seeing it from another perspective. So it was very different for me when I attended a murder mystery show to see everything happening to me and to get that experience from that. It was actually really informative to my performance, particularly things like the pre-show mingling. So when I saw the actors coming up and sort of setting the scene in character, it was just so different watching that from being that person. And I think it's invaluable to flip it like that and look at it the other way. So instead of we're having this fun playing this game, how can we project that to other people, kind of start from scratch and be like, all right, if I were walking into this, what would entertain me? What would grab me? What would make me want to keep sticking around for more?
That's fascinating because there's definitely some degree of personal chemistry. It's less about who the characters actually are and more about the performers themselves, how well they know each other, how many things they've collaborated on. That's a big reason why you see the same 2 or 3 kind of like professional, what they call celebrity DMs, hosting a lot of these games. You have Matt Mercer, who recently did a one-shot with Stephen Colbert that I was telling you about, and all of you guys should check out. Some of these other performers, they really thrive on that. They're like the spotlight, but there's something between what you called like a show captain and a lead and a host, and they're really professional improv actors at the end of the day.
Yes.
Because they take what is being given to them by their performers and they're adjusting the show as it goes on.
I should clarify that the show captain is it's either the lead, the host, or rarely, but on occasion, one of the side characters. So of any of those actors, one of them would serve as captain. The lead and the host especially, it's great when you've worked together before and you have chemistry and you can read each other, because again, you just don't know what could happen. Anyone could, someone could stand up and shout out. At the last show I did, this one lady was so into her character that she was running up in the middle of a scene and going to interact with the person trying to act, and you've just got to be prepared for stuff like that. But it's always nice when you're working with people you're familiar with, and it's just inevitable that the same people kind of get cast in the same roles with each other sometimes, because once you've done it, you get more comfortable, and really every show is different because you're doing it for different people and with different people.
My favorite phenomenon is when someone carries over those skills between those two types of performances. The best example I can give you that we were talking about earlier was one of our mutual friends. His name is Cullen. Maybe I'll get him as a guest on one of these at some point. He actually made a D&D character in my current campaign called Interpol, and his name is Richard Worldstar. We all call him Dick Worldstar.
Right.
He's currently in a coma. Rest in peace.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's his own volition. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
So we had Dick Worldstar as a character sheet, a digital file, until one day Colin decided that he was going to portray Dick Worldstar in this bi-weekly improv show that we were both a part of.
Yes, that we could do a whole podcast on as well.
We possibly could at a later date, but basically Colin got a lizard mask. Dick Worldstar he's a dragonborn, so he's a big dragon man pirate, sails the 7 seas. foul mouth and all that stuff. So he already has this premise that he's operating off of, and it's probably the first time that I've seen someone lift a character sheet and then insert it directly into a show.
Yes, and it worked really well. Now, this show that you're referring to is its own complicated thing to explain. It's really unlike anything else, but
Wednesday Night Mayhem.
Wednesday Night Mayhem,
Yes.
Let's go ahead and plug it. Wednesday Night Mayhem, every other Wednesday at Beatniks.
TheFBW.com.
Thank you.
I'll provide the link.
Now that, let me see if I can describe that in 20 seconds or less.
Go.
Okay, you have a character. You go on stage against another character. You're given 3 words, a prompt, and 3 minutes to write. You write on the spot while people throw balls at you. Then you each read what you've written, and the audience votes, red side, blue side, who moves on in the competition. So, yeah, you're going in with a character that you've already created. It could be anybody.
I think that was just about 20 seconds.
Perfect, because now I'm kind of out of the explanation and going into what Cullen did, which was show up with this character, and my reaction was, how could this character already be so developed? Because I had never seen him do it before. And when he said it was from D&D, I was just like, oh, that makes so much sense.
It's like the test kitchen for the test kitchen.
Right, and it's sort of made me think, why doesn't everybody do this? Why don't all actors play D&D?
It's funny that you say that, because that's the current trend. I might have mentioned earlier that Deborah Ann Wool of Daredevil on Netflix.
Yes.
She has a show now on, I believe, Geek and Sundry. So you're starting to see these really, like, B, A-list people like Stephen Colbert, who are really coming out of the woodwork, trends like Stranger Things.
Yeah.
They had a huge focus on D&D, and influences like that and Critical Role by Matt Mercer are really bringing it back into the mainstream in a way that has never been seen before.
Well, yeah, and it's not even back into the mainstream. It's coming into the mainstream because...
Arguably, yes.
No offense, but everyone knows D&D is for geeks, right?
I mean, no offense to you guys, but to some extent.
No, I mean, and that's not a bad thing, but I'm saying, like, from the beginning, that was sort of the stereotype is like,
Wizard
oh
hats.
yeah, it's a bunch of nerds in a room wearing silly hats and whatever.
Fake beards.
But when you actually look at what it truly is, it's character building and world building and story creation, and there's really nothing that isn't cool about it. So I think it's great that it's coming into the mainstream.
I've actually prepared a brief D&D encounter for you to navigate.
Ooh.
Is that something you'd be willing to try?
Yeah, let's do it. Oh my gosh.
That might look intimidating, but I promise you're only going to need one of these.
Oh, good.
There you go. All right, Vivian. So, your character today is going to be, let's set that generate button. You are Susanna Duststone. You are an 18-year-old female human diplomat.
Oh.
You have a bald head and brown eyes.
Oh.
You have veiny white skin. You stand 165 centimeters or 5'4", and you have a muscular build.
That's basically me.
She has an oval, unremarkable face.
Right.
And she is easily out of breath.
Oh.
She proudly worships Chantea, goddess of agriculture, farmers, gardeners, and summer.
Oh.
She is neutral good.
Okay.
She gets bored easily. She is very self-confident, and she believes in whatever deity is most helpful to her at any given moment. Not for nothing, but this is actually very similar to Vivian in real life, and I
really
promise
is.
this is random.
Wow.
Here's the plot hook. She's been pressured by local drug dealers into selling drugs.
Okay.
And I'm going to leave this right in front of Viv as a kind of a reference. And with that, we can start the encounter.
All right.
Susanna Duststone is in a land forgotten by time. You enter the scene. Your destination comes into view. There is a vast ocean of sand stretching into the horizon, dotted with pyramids, oases, and magnificent statues of a beastly pantheon of gods. The arid desert wind blows faintly across the land, like a whisper from a plain that has faded out of relevance. You are in Adamek, also known as the Ancient Egypt Plain. The ground where you materialize is marked by a checkpoint, an Interpol emblem with 2 black flags. You're a criminal informant, so to speak. You enter the main capital city of Noctimun, where there is an uprising in the Seth district. Let's get a little bit more colorful on what's going on. The ornate architecture of the Adamekian pantheon fades into the horizon. Palm trees and public tenement housing replace the sharp angles of downtown Noctimun's banks and temples. Here, in the slums of Seth, you witness a small crowd gathering around 3 young men. One of them is on the ground with a black eye. There's a young female clutching him tightly. A city patrolman that you recognize is in the middle of arresting your teammates. One of them, a monk named Usan, is unconscious on the ground. The city patrolman is in the middle of booking him. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of public law. The gods will pass judgment as they see fit through the edicts of the Razaketh dynasty. You approach. What do you do?
Officer, I don't know why you're arresting this poor man. Of course he's going to remain silent. By the way, my name's Susanna. Do you know anyone who wants to buy drugs?
One of your teammates, another young man named Gin Bennett, resists arrest slightly. Yo, officer, you making a mistake, dog. We just had a few questions for the lady. The other one, whose name is Natoa Malik, hesitates and resents that he was even in this situation. Gin, how did I let you talk me into this? The officer approaches you. Do you know these two?
Yes.
Roll insight on what this officer is going to do next. With a 5, you're not able to very deeply read the officer's motives other than he is pretty agitated and he's looking for other people to crack down on. Tristan, who is the officer's name, turns back to the other two. Shut your mouth, both of you. You know the consequences for disseminating ancient history. Take him away, boys. You're going off to the slammer. Officer Tristan summons some of his armed guards to go to grab your teammates. But these guards pause and they look at you. You can tell that they're somewhat surprised that a woman of such pure reputation and stature would be associated with these two. What do you do to these guards?
I see that you've noticed my unremarkable face. You want to get high?
This ain't the place for that. You would say that to a cop.
I don't know what this is the place for. I'm not sure why there are palm trees in the middle of the desert, officers.
You recall that Officer Tristan said something about disseminating ancient history. Why don't you roll me a knowledge history check, and I'll tell you more about what that could be. Not bad, not bad. With a 13, you understand that this civilization is not unlike the fictional one portrayed in the book 1984. This dynasty, the Razaketh dynasty, is very keen on erasing their predecessors, and that your teammates, your friends, Gin and Natoa, may have had kind of a big mouth in a public square and said something they weren't supposed to. Gin is gesturing to you as if he wants you to try to remove his restraints. You're not sure if you'll be able to in the view of these officers and these armed guards. What do you do?
Well, I am very self-confident, but I also worship many gods, particularly the goddess of agriculture, farmers, gardeners, and summer. So with the confidence bestowed on me by my gods, I think I got this.
Roll me a sleight of hand check to try to discreetly pick those bars, manacles that he has.
I got a 5.
With a 5, you start to kind of jingle around Gin's manacles, and the other guard, who's a little bit further away, picks up on this. Hey, she's trying to let him go. What do you do?
Well, I am good, but I'm also muscular. And I think I can hold this guy down while one of my friends helps me.
Ooh, okay. So we're going into an attack. So you know what? Can we have Susanna roll initiative to see if she gets to act before this guard? Fantastic. We got a 17, and it looks like he got a 16.
Ooh.
Looks like you're acting first. So the guard rushes you as if to manhandle you and pull you away from Gin. You're able to act first. How do you strike him?
I'm going to squeeze his ankles together till he falls down on the floor, and then I'm just going to push down his shoulders on top of him.
Sounds like a grapple check. Roll me an attack.
All right.
With a 7, you go to lunge at his ankles, but he pulls away at the last moment, and you slide in the dust and dirt. You did catch him off balance, though. So roll me another attack to see if you can capitalize on this situation. Let's try again. 18. With an 18, after he pulls his leg back to avoid your sweep, you're able to counter him and pull him to the ground. How do you bring this armed guard down? How are you grappling him?
How am I grappling him? Well, I'm pretty much pulling a Braun Strowman and saying, you're going to get these hands.
Okay, direct approach. I like it. In the confusion, Gin is actually going to try to get up from his restrained position, and I'll see if I can roll some kind of an acrobatics to do that. 19. Gin does an acrobatic fucking pirouette, and he backflips while still somewhat handcuffed, and he turns to you and Natoa. Yo, let's haul ass. And he grabs his friend, kind of pushes him up. Tristan, who is very ambushed by all of this, Officer Tristan, looks back up at you, and he pulls out a weapon, a baton. You're going to pay for that, young lady. And he goes to make an attack against you. For these purposes, AC of 12. That is what we call a natural 20. Tristan was very prepared for this situation. He takes his stun baton, and in the middle of your grapple against his other armed guard, gets you right in the small of your back and just jams it right between your vertebrae.
Well, wait till you see my standing back tuck.
Ooh, and Susanna wastes no time to counterattack. So let's see if you can lay hands on Tristan, on Officer Tristan as well. Try it out. For this, you're actually going to get something in 5e that we call advantage. So you're going to roll twice, and you're going to take the better result. So roll again. You get a 16. You're able to fly over to Officer Tristan's, would I say, lower section, midsection? Do you kind of leap off of one arm guard to the next? How do you do this?
Well, I'm doing my standing back tuck because I'm trying to show up my friend who just did it in shackles.
This is getting into some real wrestling stuff. So...
It's actually acrobatic gymnastics.
I stand
Unless
corrected.
you count the Braun Strowman stuff. That was all wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. One of the other armed guards starts to freak out that a young lady who appeared to be a civilian is associated with these rough and tumble types. So what I'm actually going to say is based on his somewhat shaken demeanor. Why don't you roll me an intimidate check to try to scare this guard off?
Good idea.
With a 12, he meets your gaze. How do you spook him?
Well, with my very distinctive brown eyes, I just bear right into his soul.
You stare deep into his eyes, and he kind of just snaps, and just turns tail.
Exactly.
Officer Tristan is not okay with this recent turn in developments. Hey, where are you going? The culprit's still here. At this point, Gin is backed away, and Natoa is still kind of struggling to get up. Your altercation with Officer Tristan continues. How do you further subdue him?
Well, there's a lot of fighting going on, and I'm not really much of a fighter in real life, but I do know that you can really take someone down by choking them.
Ooh, roll for chokehold. With a 13, you, I suppose, wrap your arms around his neck. Describe for us this chokehold that you're putting Officer Tristan in.
So I'm choking him with one arm, and I'm just kind of displaying my real terrifying hand right in front of his eyes to give him an extra little bit of spookiness.
Yikes. Well, with that, he is sufficiently choked out, and he actually starts to lose consciousness as he resists.
I can't believe I was done in by a girl. A girl so short. I didn't see this coming.
And he kind of just tips over. The other guard looks at you, and he looks at his now outnumbered odds, kind of just throws his hands up, drops his baton. I was never here. I can't book like this. I'm only a contractor. And he starts to turn tail and run. Natoa flips around, looks at you, and says, what a drag. I can't believe I missed all of the action. They're free. Now that you actually have a moment to spare, roll me, this is going to be something called Thieves' Tools to try to pick their locks, something you have proficiency in. You're going to roll twice for me.
That was a 5.
First one's a 5. Gin is still kind of held down. Natoa, however, benefits from your roll of a 16. You're able to go right in there, and do you have something like a bobby pin on you?
Well, I've got a drug needle on me.
So, please share with us how you use this drug needle to get these handcuffs off of your friend Natoa's back.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the lock. I'm real good at that, and I got this real skinny little needle that's going to help me do that.
Okay. Your needle jams right in there. You hear a click and a pop as the manacles fall right off. I really hope I'm, not contaminated by that. Want to do some drugs?
Yeah.
Gin shouts back, yo, wait for me! The sun sets on the scene. The uprising at Seth starts to dissipate. The crowd, which formerly was cheering and jeering, realizes they just saw resisting arrest live in action. And a lot of these townsfolk are going to pretend that they were never here. Susanna Duststone lives to tell another tale. Good job, Viv.
I'm going to go buy a wig now.
And with that, thanks for tuning in to another edition of Campaign Corner. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed today's episode. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the different tabletop RPGs you've played. Keep rolling, and march forth.